Hello, beautiful people of the internet. It's day 31 in Blueprints. We're here to solve some puzzles. Episode number 43, I think. Welcome back. In the last episode, we kind of hustled, kind of didn't, and ended up rushing our way to a clock tower that we missed out on by a couple minutes, maybe. There's no guarantee that I'm missing anything at clock tower. There's no guarantee that being there by 1:30 means anything. And yet I still really want to be there by 1:30. I did get 2 gems to start on top of my normal 2 gems. So we're up to 5. We have a sleeping... Now, make that 6. We have a sleeping mask, 5 keys. Things are good. Things are good. So, what are we going to get up to today? I don't know. At this point, like I said, I've said it a couple times. I'm in a what is the game going to give me state rather than a... I'll take special items. Fucking battery pack, dude. Lockpick kit is fine. The fuck is battery pack even for? Yikes. That's not a that's a more of a turn of phrase rather than a what is it actually used for. It just means it has not seemed like the most valuable item I've ever picked up in the game so far. It seemed very unvaluable. We're gonna see what the game gives us. So far, the game gives us probably not great room outside, and it was a gamble, and I gambled. Lockpick kit has also been less valuable than I would like it to be. And now we'll see what it gives us. What it gives us inside. Early dining room. That seems crazy. I feel like we should keep that, right? Do pantry. And then we'll go this way. And then we'll do probably parlor. Let's see if I can get it correct this time. We missed our first parlor last time. They're definitely getting more difficult. This box is not empty. This box contains gems. So one of those two has to be false. All statements that contain the word gems are false. So, if true, this box would be false and would not contain gems. Meaning this one would be true. The question to me is, all statements that contain the word gems are false. Does that include this box? Because if so, and if true, oh boy. Okay. It's interesting. Gems is colored differently, which to me makes it feel like it is not included. I don't know if that's an update or something. I don't know. We've had one parlor game that was somewhat like this before, I think. Had a statement somewhat like this. To me, this feels like just it's one of these two, and then this is the key to help us get out of that 50-50 coin flip, right? This box, but I don't understand, because I think if this is false, all statements that contain the word gems are false. If that is false, then it would be all statements that contain the word gems are true, I think. Which would mean this one is true. And this one's false. I think maybe the key is that this one includes the word gems. So one way that things could go is this box is true. This box does contain gems, meaning this box is false, meaning it is empty, meaning the gems are in here. In that situation, this is true, this is false. This one would be false. All statements that contain the word gems are not false because this one is true. This one would be false, meaning it says gems on it and is also false, which I really like. That's one meaning. That means the white box is the correct. That's one potential solution, which is the white box is correct. On the other hand, if this one is false, sorry, let's back up real quick. In that situation where the white box is the one with the gems in it, that means you have 1 true, 2 false. Seems fine. In this situation where the blue one is the one that has the gems in it, this would be false. This box, this would be true. This box is not empty, aka it has gems. So true and has gems. This would be false. Which I think would make this one basically true. But it's true despite the fact that it also has the word gems in it, meaning it should be false if it is true. So I think it has to be the white one. We're going to try it. We're going to see what happens. Please let me get it right. I want to get it right. Let's go. Okay, let's go. So that's an important learning. This is an important learning parlor game. What we just learned is, I think, if it says the word that it is commenting on, that also counts. I don't know, dude. That's a tough one. We got it, though. Thank God. We're back on a winning streak. Let's do a den here so we can get over to the right file. We're going to keep an eye on the time every time. It's currently 8, basically 9. The locked trunk, we'll open that. We have enough keys, and it probably has a secret key. Cool. Special key. Early security, because we should have a key card. We do have a key card. Let's do that. Early security, meaning chuck in here. So far, this run is going very much like the last one. I do think I'm probably at this point going to try and go relatively quickly until I find either that I am not going to make the 1:30 cutoff, or that I am going to... If I find anything that requires a lot of thought or time, like lore or a puzzle or something like that, then I basically will shove the clock tower hopes aside. Otherwise, we'll go quickly through the first ranks and just kind of see what happens. We're going to put in a special order for a magnifying glass, probably, despite the fact that I should probably do a shovel. Approve order. Order accepted. Get me out of here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to spend any time here longer than I need to. All right. We could do bedroom closet here. A gem. That's good. Key. I think we can draft at least one more over here before we go anywhere. Observatory. We'll keep drafting here. This is 18, which is still short of 15, or sorry, of 20. So we've got 3, which I don't remember. Extra footsteps. And then we've got a big one. What is it? That's the sail. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So that's the sail. And the sail is a commissary, kitchen, locksmith, bookshop. Are the places that works. So, spin the wheel for good luck. Draft another one for now. I don't know. Probably do break room. Get a key. Got 11. 4. I swear to God they switched the colors, right? I swear I swear it was minus was in the second column, was in the second thing. 4 times 2 is 8, minus 7 is 1. 20, yeah, definitely. 20 divided by 5 is 4, minus 1. 20 divided by 5 is 4, minus 1 is 3. 8 divided by 8 is 1. Times 20 minus 8 is 12. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, we can just keep drafting. So far, we haven't run into any weird spots. I think you take laboratory here. It's an all blue house so far. Laboratory, we at least get the experiment set up and then decide what to do from there about whether or not we continue. Footsteps. I'd love to get power to this room. Freaking soon. Unlock or bypass a security door. You can do stuff. Whenever you spin 2 or more gems drafting a room, the next 3 times you open a lock trunk. So my priority when I go to experiments is, is there a effect that is permanent or pushes like an allowance or pushes things forward towards the next day? But that's not what happens. It's gain a key, a gem, or a die, or set your steps to 40. I think probably the safest one is, the safest effect is gain 1 key, 1 gem, or 1 die. And I think it's probably best to do it by using expensive rooms. Combine. Start the experiment. Okay. Now, I am very quickly going to pause the game to hope, and I hope that doesn't change the time in the game, and I'm going to write down, because I want to keep my options open. My to-do list includes power to laboratory. I always forget where the A's and the O's go in laboratory until I say it out loud like Dexter did back on the cartoon. All right, that's on my to-do list. So now it is whenever I spend 2 or more gems drafting a room, I get something random, which is cool. Patio here is useless. We'll take Nook. This is such an interesting way. We're truly snaking up the right-hand corner of the house. But I'm keeping going because I have enough resources to do it. Chapel here is fine. I could do secret passage into green room, which I think could also be cool for either patio, veranda, or I have secret garden key as well. So if it's locked, I could just get secret garden. I think we should do that. Is that a good use of that or bad? I'll take chapel. Chapel's fine here. And it's also in a good spot for me to leave it and come back, I think. Unless we lose way too many footsteps, but who knows. Okay. Eastern file's looking good. Very good. We need to draft some stuff on the west and the center. Drawing room goes a bad direction. Hallway also goes a bad direction. Utility closet even worth taking? I think we should take it. Just because, so gymnasium off, dark room on, garage on, key card off. The only thing that does is it gets us a, it doesn't use some of our valuable rooms. in a position where we really need them, which is, or in a position where they're not that useful, which is right here. So let's go pantry, money, apple. And then this run could get sketchy really quickly. Kitchen things are half off, which is kind of cool. Let's do it. We have one die, and we want to keep that die for we'll take the club sandwich. That's good. That's a good offer right now. Banana's a good offer too. Glazed salmon if you get aquarium. So we should look at that every time. I always forget. Take club sandwich for now. We can come back to this later. We're moving relatively quickly. Courtyard is beautiful here. Thank God. I was going to use my die if I didn't get something that went both directions. I do not have a shovel. I do now have a metal detector, which is going to be good for keys and coins. Go south. Her ladyship's chamber. Fuck. I have no bedroom, so that doesn't matter. Library would let me read that book. I don't want to read a book. I want to go fast. I want to go quick. I want to go fast. This gives me one key. Is that right? And wastes a dime? A gem? Okay. We'll go library. The other two options are bad. We'll just go library. This is not a great use of library, but here's what we can do. What if we cheat the game a little bit? I'm going to save all these photos real quick, and then we're going to pause the game, and I don't know if that pauses time from running forward. Curse of Blackbridge is the name of the book. Curse of Blackbridge 1 is the screenshot. All right, BRB. I'm going to take a bunch of screenshots. BRB. Holy shit, buckle up. This is the longest book of all time, and I'm so excited for it. So I just took so many screenshots. And I was trying not to even look at the... I was like trying not to look at what I was screenshotting so that I can react to this all, blind. Or at least react to it as I'm reading it. But I'll just tell you this much. It's a lot of pages. Get very comfy. Go grab yourself a drink or take a potty break or whatever. And ready, and welcome to story time. Let's read The Curse of Blackbridge. We're going to read it in a funny way, which is that we're going to read it via screenshots because maybe you can have your cake and eat it too. I'm not sure. The game is paused. Maybe that will mean that time does not progress in the game, meaning maybe we can sort of cheat our way towards still getting to Clock Tower by 1:30. And if you're like, Ryan, that's cheating, how dare you? I've been cheating. The entire time I've been playing this game, I've been cheating. I have screenshots of the entire game's contents. What do you mean? I'm just using a tool at my disposal. We're not cheating. And if we are, then like, if you're upset about that, that's fine. I'm not. We're just gonna see if we can still get to Observatory by 1:30. Or Clock Tower. Welcome to The Curse of Blackbridge by Redford Ewing. I wish I had a magnifying glass. Because there are some beautiful drawings in this thing. And also, doesn't that hand remind you of the hand that sort of paints the globe? That's what it made me think of. The Curse of Blackbridge. Forward. The legend of Blackbridge is one that is well known to the people of the Grand Realm, for versions of this tale have been passed down from generation to generation. With each new telling, the story has changed, becoming over the years more colorful, more verbose, and, Oxford comma, as one might expect, that's also a clause or a comma that separates a clause, increasingly horrifying. However, with so many renditions and unique personal touches, the task of confining and binding this tale to text seemed an ambitious and impossible challenge. Over the course of my research, I have heard dozens of variations of the legend, and while the details would often change, I was surprised how much of the story's heart remained the same. Yet the more I listened, the clearer it became that there could never be a definitive version of this tale capable of capturing all the wonder and myth of Blackbridge. In the end, I chose to write down what felt most authentic. The story my grandmother told me, as a boy, long ago. That is a beautiful foreword. Oh, the land of mythology. Where, or oral tellings of stories, where they change over time. Fairy tale. They change over time. Emphasis is put in different places. In a very similar way, it makes me think of, in a similar but very different way, it makes me think of what happens when you censor books, which has happened in this game too. What falls under the microscope of human interest and what falls to the margins of human interest and is then forgotten. Different versions of the story will definitely tell different things. The Curse of Blackbridge, Part 1, The Berry Picker from Oris. Those look like holly berries. Many years ago, before peace had become a familiar word, there lived a group of rogues, so wayward that the locals deemed it appropriate to call their number the Unholy Hounds. We're starting in the land of fairy tale, many years ago. They were feral outlaws composed of society's worst in a time when society was at its worst for each crime that fearful travelers credited. For each crime that fearful travelers credited to the group, a dozen more lay unclaimed, each worse than the last. For the gentry, however, who often value their coffers more than their companions, no crime could measure more wicked than the group's primary enterprise, high road robbery. One such member of this so-called band of rogues was a boy of 13 years, Robin Hood, Jesper, who had not been lucky in life, having lost 2 brothers to war and parents to famine. In the years of hunger that followed, Jesper lived in a gutter behind a churchyard, relying on the nourishment of scurrying bugs and weeds harvested from the cracks of the alleyway to sustain his pitiful existence. It is not surprising that a child aiming to escape such hardships would take any easy road out, an easy and well-traveled road paved with temptations, leading out of the city and into the gentry lands, where loose purse strings entwine with the strands of salvation and glisten equally with the hope of opportunity. It was this road that eventually led Jesper to the end of his youth, a hidden cave at the bottom of Blackbridge Canyon. The end of his youth is a beautiful phrase there. It was here that he met his surrogate family and saviors, that notorious gang of godless outlaws known as the Unholy Hounds. Despite the hardened circumstances that had led him to this vocation of banditry, Jesper was surprisingly tender-hearted and often teased by the group for being too kind for such an ignoble life. For this reason, Jesper was assigned the innocent role of berry picker. It was not just innocence that set berry picking apart from the gang's more wicked undertakings, for it was the only duty performed without the safety of night's concealment. Jesper, no stranger to solitude, did not protest that he alone worked while the others slept soundly, tucked away in the cave at the bottom of Blackbridge Canyon. On one such occasion, Jesper decided to get an early start. He left the cave, berry basket in hand, and set out into the woods before the morning sun had even brushed against the tallest treetops. It was cooler in the mornings, but the headway that dawn afforded meant Jesper could reach the furthermost berry patches without worry of being chastised for tarrying upon his return. There's a basket of berries. It took over 3 hours on foot to reach his destination, and along the way Jesper had passed by many a familiar bush, all priorly pillaged and so bereft of berries that one would have to dedicate several moments in earnest examination before finding a single one. Jesper was patient, but even patience has its limits. He was confident that even accounting for the time lost to this long stretch of travel, his efforts would be well worth the pains. Surveying the patches in this new grove surprised even Jesper. The red dots suspended among the leaves seemed as numerous as stars in the skies. Upon seeing such a bounteous sight, he clutched his berry basket tightly and nearly toppled over out of joy. Once he had regained his senses, Jesper made quickly made a decision. He would not reveal the location of this newfound treasure. Instead, he would earn the respect of his confederates who, upon seeing his yield, might attribute the success to hard work. Smiling at his plan, Jesper set off to fill his basket and was making steady strides in this task when the sound of thundering hooves interrupted him. A carriage is approaching. The thought of it made Jesper freeze. Had he been so enchanted by his discovery that he had neglected to observe his surroundings? How could a roadway be so close? He ducked down and crept towards the impending sound, hiding behind one of the larger bushes nearby. It was only a moment more before the sound source revealed itself. Within 50 paces of where Jesper hid, an elegant carriage with gold trim came soaring around a corner of trees, led by 2 beautiful white horses and conveyed by a stern-looking driver seated atop the vehicle, flaunting the most sophisticated regalia Jesper had ever seen. It was not just any carriage, it was a royal carriage. Even without ever having witnessed such a sight before, Jesper was certain. The sight had so transfixed Jesper that he stood awestruck, unable to tear away as the carriage approached. The little concealment the bush provided was soon proven unequal to the driver's lofty perch, and upon spotting the boy, he pulled the reins with such effect that the noble steeds slid to a sudden halt with precise control. "You, boy! Get out from behind that bush," he shouted with a rigidity that betrayed a modest amount of fear. "You startled me half to death coming round the bend of my own drive, and me seeing such an unfamiliar face in a place where there ought not be any face." Jesper quickly contemplated running. The man was much older, and his dress was suitable for courtly behavior, not dashing through the bramble and mud. I was picking berries." Jesper raised the half-filled basket up to allow the driver to see the proof of his words. The demeanor of the man suddenly changed. It was a change that Jesper was familiar with. He had many times seen the same stern expressions on the most fiendish bandits melt away when presented with a berry basket. Any suspicions that the driver might have had instantly evaporated, for even the notion of a member of the unholy hounds picking berries seemed farcical. The softened expression even made allowances for a smile. "Berries, eh? Say, you couldn't have picked a better spot for them, could you? I used to pick berries here as a boy." Jesper took his cue to finally step out from behind the bush, proudly brandishing his basket. "I know, and what luck I found them. I have only just begun picking, and look how many I have. It would have taken me 4-fold the time back home to procure this number." The driver bent down for a closer look. "And where is your home, boy? It must be quite far." Jesper replied with a scripted response. "A little south of Tanner Fork, just past the burnt woods." "My God, that is far. You couldn't have come all that way only this morning." It was true, Tanner Fork was in the exact opposite direction that Jesper had traveled, and while that response would seem perfectly reasonable in a location closer to Blackbridge Canyon, he could see why it might seem less believable here. "Sir, I've traveled much farther for much less profit. I dare say there is no distance yet made by man that would not be worth undertaking for a prize such as these. Surely you have tasted them for yourself?" Jesper felt happier with this response, as it seemed to amplify the man's smile. "In my youth, often, but perhaps I took it for granted because I never had to travel very far. And even then, my father would always drive us here in our carriage, so I'm ashamed I never had to walk such a stretch to earn an equal reward." It was Jesper's time to smile. "Then let my efforts reward us both today." He raised the basket even higher. "A taste in memory of your youth, sir." The driver chuckled and removed one glove, bending over the seat to reach down to the basket. At the moment his fingers touched the first berry, the dagger in turn met his throat, cutting through a superficial layer of skin and drawing blood. Jesper caught the man's startled eyes. "And for that taste, I will have your purse, sir, in memory of my youth." What a line! Jesper is a cold-blooded killer! The driver's arm had gone stiff, his chin raised and trembling, more frightened than he had ever been before. Whether unable or incapable of speaking, he did not respond to the boy. Sorry. When I read, I tend to start yawning. When I read out loud, I tend to start yawning. Apologies. Perhaps he did not think his jaw could afford to be engaged at this particular time. Jesper let the basket drop, freeing his other hand to probe the man's pockets. Do not mistake me, sir. I will not kill you if you give me no cause, though I will admit the thought of taking your carriage and leaving you the indignity of walking appeals to me. That's a weird italicized word. Unable to find a purse in the man's coat, Jesper pivoted to search the seat underneath him. Why have you no purse upon your person? No purse upon your person. The driver slowly raised his hand cautiously, pointing towards the carriage door behind him. Jesper lowered the knife's edge a small degree to allow the man to speak, which he did in turn softly. There's a lockbox in the carriage. Well, come down then, and grant me the courtesy of sparing your life and binding your hands, a concession I assure you of my tender heart, for it would be much easier to slit your throat. The man started to comply, slowly lowering himself from the driver's seat of the carriage. Once down, Jesper guided him away from the carriage to a nearby tree, where he instructed him to get on his knees and put his hands behind his back. Excusing his inexperience, the man indulged Jesper, while he figured out how to adequately bind him. The smile and kindness Jesper had seen on this man's face, now nothing more than a distant memory. In their place, cold, dark eyes displaying no emotion. I wonder, should I grant you the same clemency you are showing me? Jesper stopped, surprised by the question, but ignored it, secured the final bindings, and then hastily returned to the carriage. With one hand on the door's handle, he turned back to the man. If there is no lockbox, there will be no clemency. Inside, the carriage was surprisingly dusty and unswept, a stark contrast to the elegant and polished golden facade of the exterior. It had apparently been many years since a passenger had enjoyed passage in this vehicle. This all but confirmed what Jesper had suspected. The driver of this carriage was not a liveried servant in the employ of some greater master. Any curiosity that this observation might have further produced was quickly abandoned upon seeing what rested under the carriage's back seat, a large wooden lockbox. Despite its hefty appearance, the box was surprisingly easy to handle. Within a few minutes, Jesper had dislodged it from its hold and carried it out into the sunlight. Inspecting the box carefully, two observations were made. Totemic symbols found carved on all four sides of the box hinted that the box was very old and likely not created by Orindian hands. It reminded him of artifacts from the old world, was presumably crafted in one of those ancient realms. Secondly, the box was secured by a rusted yet robust padlock and would not open easily without a key. Jesper looked over to see the driver quietly observing from his indentured position. Do you perhaps have a key you can provide me to open this box? Without emotion, the driver replied, there is no key to that box. Jesper stood up. Easy enough, then. He headed over to a nearby rock of sizable dimension and lifted the stone up, carrying it back to the box. If there was ever a time when that lock had been resistant to brute force, it wasn't recent. With one hit, the stone had completely shattered the rusted lock. He bent back down and opened the lid. Inside was an effigy, a crude figure chiseled from stone. Very small pause here to say, it has some, images or something on the outside, which does remind me of something. That's not the same thing. Is this right here in the background? This. Ah, crap. Don't delete it. That's not what I meant. Am I onto something here? I think I could be. Maybe not. Maybe not. Anyways. Without too much deliberation, Jesper bent down and picked it up. Somewhat surprised how heavy it seemed, given how light the box had felt. Having expected to find something more akin to gold or gems, he looked questioningly to the man, hoping to find an explanation. The driver's smile had once again returned. You are cursed, boy, for deadly is the stone. Again with the italics. You have opened... I mean, italics for emphasis? Sure, I hear you. You've opened that which should never have been opened, and you are cursed. Jesper carried the effigy over to the man and shoved it in front of his face. What is it? That's one. Feeling his disappointment rising to anger now, Jesper tightened his grip on the effigy. One what, you mumbling agentor? Now, hold up. Those are some, you first something. I don't know. You first something. And in God's name, why have you no purse upon your person? Is this a genie type situation or a djinn type situation? What is it? That's one. It's a question. Why have you no purse upon your person? The man did not seem intimidated one pace. He paused for effect. It was the step. One pace. 12 more and you will be dead. He had only had a second to flinch before the effigy struck him in the head and put an end to his cryptic ramblings. I got chills just now thinking about a curse relating to the amount of steps you can take in a day or with your life. Interesting. That has something. The question here, of course, is what does this novel have to do with what we're doing? I see a puzzle box and I see a step-related curse. He only had a second to flinch before the effigy struck him in the head, put an end to the ramblings. If there was ever a time when the old man had been resistant to brute force, it wasn't recent. What a weird freaking line that is. Isn't wait. No, I understand. That is a reference back to the line before. If there was ever a time when that lock had been resistant to brute force, it was not recent. I understand. Get rid of all these pages. Jesper looked down at the sculpted stone figure, now splattered red. Was it cursed? Was he cursed? He had, of course, heard stories of curses and had never doubted their validity in the past. But now that he was standing face to face with the possibility of being cursed, his mind pleaded with him to be skeptical. And if he was cursed, what difference would that knowledge make? A dozen more paces would not be enough to find another living soul, to say nothing of the chances of procuring a remedy. If he did not move from where he now stood, he could live maybe another 3 or 4 days, maybe more given the abundance of nearby berries. A plan that, if we ignore its obvious faults, might, in italics, provide additional opportunities for help to come along. But what good would that do? To be discovered here? Beside a body, stolen goods in hand, bloated from berries and raving about a curse that could very well not be real. No, it would most certainly be better to face one's fate now, take a dozen paces, and see if life goes on. Look at this dead body. Holy shit. But Jesper found his legs unable to make that first step. His mind was unable to convince his limb to waste away 1/12 of his life in a single motion. Feeling the desperation sink in, he hopelessly looked about him for a solution. And if, by some stroke of luck, the gods had heard his plea, a miracle materialized before him as he found himself suddenly at the end of a fairy tale. 2 white horses and a carriage of golden trim were beside him, the answer to his immediate prayers. He laughed at his fortune and calculated the short number of paces back to the road. 4. Perhaps only 3 if he jumped. He made a quick survey to see if there was anything he wished to grab before taking the plunge. This sounds all too familiar. Pre-planning your steps before you waste them? He thought about removing the driver's fancy coat, as that appeared to be of some value, but the additional risk of undertaking such a task too great to chance. And so, after a profound breath, he took his second, third, and fourth steps, though they were quite large. Seated now behind the horses, he reached for the reins and suddenly realized that he was still gripping the effigy. If the curse was real, it would most certainly be better left here. If, on the other hand, the story was fictitious, there might be some appraisal that could be made of the figure. It was, after all, found within a lockbox, whose typical function oft secures objects of value. Having witnessed firsthand the horrors of destitution, Jesper found his mind equally reluctant to allow his hand let go. If it is cursed, I die. If not today, then tomorrow. And if I die, what care have I? And with that statement said aloud, to the horses, seemingly, Jesper took up the reins with confidence. Oh, if you think we're done, you don't know what's happening. Part 2, Below the Black Bridge. Below the Black Bridge. Miller awoke to some light nudging from a familiar foot. Only one person would have the cheek to awaken her in such ill-mannered fashion. Shaking the sleep from her eyes, she glared up at him in the darkness, but did not say a word. He nudged her again, teasingly, then stepped back into the dim. After taking a moment for her eyes to adjust to the darkness of the cave, Miller remembered. So Miller must be a member of the unholy peoples, hanging out in the cave while Jesper was sleeping. She was on third watch today, quietly collecting her things and wits. Miller turned as she left, waving to her young friend, who was more than likely already asleep. She crept through the cavern's main passage, careful not to wake the sleeping bandits around her. Like a hero in a book, she often mused, italicized. Quietly, she grabbed a bow from the haphazardly formed pile of weapons, shaking the accompanying quiver in the darkness to assess how many arrows it held. She then walked towards the sun-drenched mouth of the cavern, ready to start her shift. Above her, in one of the few trees found in the canyon, Miller could see that Ravia was already posted. She waved, and Ravia waved back. Calling out to each other was strictly forbidden. Anything, italics, louder than a gesture in the canyon was forbidden. When Miller reached the tree, Ravia lowered a braided rope and pointed to the ground behind her. Miller turned, following the finger, and saw a pail of water resting beside a nearby log. She turned back to Ravia, nodded, and secured the pail to the rope. The pail went up first, and in turn, Miller followed. Ravia reached across to grab the water. Miller leaned back to give her space. There was not much room for maneuvering in this tree post, a necessary concession for the concealment the outpost demanded. Ravia tilted the pail up to her mouth dramatically, illustrating how thirsty she had been. Miller laughed silently as water poured out, splashing onto Ravia's face. It was a bit too daring and noisy of a joke, and had the others been around, they would have certainly been scolded for the unwarranted sound. But Miller appreciated the efforts Ravia took to verbalize the silence of the morning. This novel is so weird. The writing is very old-timey, which I think they have nailed in terms of the, like... It reads like a Hardy Boys book, is how I would describe the, like, sentence-level writing. But a sentence like this... But Miller appreciated the efforts Ravia took to verbalize the silence of the morning. It's just so overworked. It's funny. They had been on third watch together for over a month, and during that speechless time, their friendship had grown into something special. Affection was unsurprisingly scarce among the unholy hounds. She had felt camaraderie before, of course, but intimacy, never. From their elevated vantage, the girls could see both the concealed entrance of the cavern as well as a clear view of the bridge that spanned across the canyon. Blackbridge was the link between the Gentry lands and the northern mountains. The overpass that connected Orris and Reddington. Very interesting. That puts us really close to our place. To the city-faring travelers of the realm, the bridge was an unavoidable crossing. Hold up, real quick, I have an idea. Is there a bridge on here? Damn it. Reddington and Oris. I was like, they're both on here. Maybe there would be a bridge on this geography. Shit. To the city-faring travelers of the realm, the bridge was an unavoidable crossing. In the day, the task was to ensure that travelers passed by without stopping. At night, the task was to ensure that they do. Like most of her band, Miller preferred the night. The biting glare of the sun might be tolerable to farmhands and bricklayers, but to a cavern-housed bandit, it was a source of constant annoyance. In the day, there was no shroud to conceal her expressions, nor to hide her thoughts. She felt exposed. Ravia touched her elbow and pointed up. Miller, striving to suppress a budding smile, suddenly shook her head in response. There were many signs that the unholy hounds used in lieu of words, but the two of them had developed an extended vocabulary. Gestures quietly forged in the shared solitude of their month among the branches. She watched as Ravia shifted, placing her palms flat on the floorboards beneath them. Miller knew what she was trying to say, but shook her head a second time. It was often more fun to pretend not to understand. Ravia rolled her eyes and turned away, looking back to the canyon. Squinting through the leaves, the two girls held still, watching and listening. It was not long until Miller, too, heard the sounds of approach. Ravia held up two bent fingers, and a few moments later, two men emerged from the bridge's southern end. They were dressed in a familiar uniform, long gray coats with black facings, white waistcoats, and black tricorn hats. They belonged to the local patrol, the Black Guard. Well, interesting. I know of a Red Guard. So I wonder what time this curse might have happened. Like, what's the historical timeline this tale might have supposedly happened in? Although not an everyday occurrence, their presence at Blackbridge wasn't an unusual sight. It typically indicated an important traveler's impending passage across the bridge. Information that the girls would promptly relay to their leaders as soon as the coast was clear. But this report, while exciting, was rarely acted upon. In Miller's 5 years in the Unholy Hounds, she had never once seen a carriage taken in open daylight when the Black Guard was nearby. The men had nearly reached the bridge's north end when Miller heard the horses, faintly at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. Ravia's eyes met Miller's, the same concern mirrored in each other's expression. This did not sound like the typical carriage, cautiously approaching the bridge to cross. Instead of the familiar crunch of the highroad's gravel, they heard the harsh clattering of hoofbeats against stone. Is this Jesper coming along below the bridge, alerting everyone to the hound's presence? Both girls quickly redirected their attention downwards, looking through the foliage. The sounds were not coming from the high road, but from the canyon itself. The horses were coming from below the bridge. In an instant, Miller had knocked an arrow and drawn her bow. Go! Ravia was gone before the whisper had even left Miller's mouth. The young scout was already sliding down the bank below, racing towards the cave. There was no road that ran below the canyon. There was no reason for numerous horses to be approaching their cave. There was only one reasonable conclusion. Both girls had reached it instantly. The base had been compromised. This was a Blackguard attack. The moment the horses came into view, Miller let loose her first arrow. She was surprised to see a carriage. She'd expected cavalry. Before she even finished processing that thought, her second arrow was in the air. Without a trail, it would be unthinkable for a carriage to traverse such rough terrain, yet she watched as the wheels jolted over the rocky riverbed. A third arrow was now in flight. There would be no need for a fourth. The driver slumped over just moments before the vehicle dipped into a small ditch, slamming into an embankment. The force of this sudden halt immediately shattered the front two wheels and catapulted the driver from his seat. Utterly confused now, Miller quickly glanced over her shoulder to see if any horses were also approaching from the rear. Down in the canyon, the entire horde of unholy hounds came spilling forth from the earth as if hell itself had suddenly sprung open. The group seemed even more bewildered than Miller, half asleep and tripping over one another in a desperate attempt to engage an unseen enemy in combat. Miller could see Ravia among their number, the only one looking up at her. Her expression was chilling. There would be no need for a silent gesture to convey what they both now realized. They had made a mistake. Only a couple pages left. The gang's chieftain. Now, what the fuck is this? That's dead Jesper, but what is this? It's the figure, right? But what is the figure? Which end is the head? Which end is the not head? I've had the question the entire time, what is the effigy of? It's just been described as an effigy. Is that going to be the, like, final blow of this book, is to be like, the effigy was this? The gang's chieftain, Joffrey Heartslasher, led the others, cautiously approach... What? That's a D&D character if I ever fucking heard of one. Cautiously approaching the crashed carriage like a suspicious fox would near a baited trap. There were no words exchanged as the group crept forward in customary silence. A dozen or so paces in front of the wreckage lay the far-flung driver, an arrow protruding from his broken body, and beside him, a blood-stained effigy carved from stone. Miller was inconsolable. That's a logo. That's the effigy, for sure. Miller was inconsolable. Jesper had always been her favorite. He had always shadowed her in the night, clinging to the hymns of her every move, the way a child tails behind an older sibling. Tender-hearted, she had always called him, though deep down she had known that wasn't quite true. His appearance of gentleness concealed a raw, resilient durability that emerged in the most perilous of situations. He had been a flower among the nettles of this cave, but he still had thorns. What a line, honed by a grim past and 100 hands of misfortune. Oh, that is my favorite sentence in the book so far. They buried him in the darkness in the back of one of the larger cavern rooms. He was interred with a berry basket and a silk handkerchief that he had treasured. The mysterious effigy they had found beside him served as a distinguished gravestone, a marker that stood out as special among the rows of similar swords marking neighboring plots. No one spoke, not even in whispers. There was nothing to say. Miller awoke the next day to a thunderous shaking and rattling of the earth, a far cry from the playful nudging of the previous day. She strained to adjust her eyes, but the choking sting of stirred-up dust caused her to flinch. Panic was also in the air. The sounds of scurried footsteps and clattering feet filled the space around her. But even in alarm, the silence was louder. What was it that sounded so strange? Miller closed her eyes tight and used her feet to guide her along the passage. What was it that sounded so strange? She uses her feet to guide her along the passage. The whispers around her were getting louder, and intense voices could be heard ahead. Louder speech than she had ever heard spoken in the canyon. The growing dread grew as Miller approached the mouth of the cave, her eyes now open wide despite the dust. Shouldn't it be day? Miller felt a hand in the darkness pulling at her. It was Ravia. The two embraced. Miller did not need to see her to understand. Ravia placed two bent fingers against Miller's cheek, and with that touch against her face, Miller felt the same sinking feeling from the previous day. Two bent fingers confirmed what Miller had suspected. The girls had forgotten to relay one critical piece of information to the others. An hour or so later, the screams began. Blood-curdling cries of hopeless desperation. Captain Fodrick Lee of the Black Guard looked down from the ridge of the canyon to the collapsed entrance of the cave. Ah, he grinned. Now they speak. Well, that's the end. Well. What a book. What a lovely, just a little tale. That was fun. I feel like that was probably less puzzle and more world building and lore. And I do feel like it's a very important piece of world building and lore. Because I feel like I have a better understanding of what world we might exist in that tales like that get told to your kids. The same way that, you can look at the artifacts of any especially the like storytelling artifacts of any human civilization, and that tells you that's a good way to like learn who they are, what they value. Even in that world, a political looming structure that threatens everyday life, that threatens the everyday life of average people or thieves, bandits, that greases the wheels of the rich. The blackguards walk ahead of the wealthy. Yeah, the like magical nature of the curse being a thing to be afraid of. It's more world building than anything else, and I enjoyed it. But I do really, really have to pee now. So I think what we're gonna do is actually, I think that probably is a good place to call it an episode, and I'll come back after I pee, and we'll start a new episode, and we'll continue this run. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for story time. I hope you enjoyed that. If you've read it before, maybe you skipped it. That's fine. You know, do what you want. But we'll continue the next episode from right here, right after I take a visit to the toilet. Bye!